The mythic dawn grows nearer with every rift in the firmament. Soon, very soon, the lines now blurred will be erased. Tamriel and Oblivion rejoined, the mythic age reborn. Lord Dagon shall walk Tamriel again. The world shall be remade. The new age shall rise from the ashes of the old. My vision shall be realized.
Mankar Camoran is, I would argue, the central antagonist of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Some people would say that Mehrunes Dagon is the real enemy, but I disagree. Mankar was the chosen of Dagon, and as his chosen he was granted the Mysterium Xarxes, a profaned text written by the Prince of Destruction himself, if the rumors are to be believed. Mankar Camoran became enamored with this book and wrote 4 treatises pertaining to it, known as the Commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. These analyses of the Mysterium Xarxes would serve as the foundational text and the gateway drug to recruit novitiates into Mankar's secretive cult, the Mythic Dawn. These commentaries weave unorthodox views about the Mundus and its place in the universe. The Mythic Dawn emerged from the shadows and secured its place in history on the 27th of Last Seed, 3rd Era 433. On this day, the cult assassinated Emperor Uriel Septim VII and all his heirs, in an attempt to dispel the dragon fires that protected the Mundus from Daedric invasion, to summon forth their god Mehrunes Dagon, and usher in a new age under his rule. Were it not for Uriel's secret bastard son, Martin Septim, the Mythic Dawn would have succeeded in their Daedric invasion of Tamriel, and eventually Nirn. But why would they do this? What could possibly drive someone to join this cult? In short, was Mankar Camoran onto something? In order to understand his writings, teachings, philosophies, and ambitions, we must first understand where Mankar comes from, which is actually a difficult question to answer. Camoran's early life is clouded, to say the least. Though there is some room for speculation on his lineage, Camoran is believed to be the illegitimate heir of the notorious Haemon Camoran, otherwise known as the Camoran Usurper. There are some odd things going on here with Mankar, however. The Camoran dynasty is an ancient lineage that traces itself quite literally back to the beginning of the First Era. The Camorans have historically ruled over Valenwood and are typically presented as Bosmeri, which is our first clue that something is off when it comes to Mankar Camoran, who is presented as an Altmer. According to the book Racial Phylogeny, the racial traits inherited by a child are mostly those of their mother. In Mankar's case, interestingly, we do know the race of his mother. In The Refugees, which takes place in the year 267 of the Third Era, we have chronicled the tales of a group of refugees fleeing the Camoran usurper. Mankar's mother, Callis, is one such refugee, who was actually a former Bosmeri mistress to Haemon Camoran. Haemon is likely a Bosmer himself, coming from the Camoran line, so the progeny of their union, Mankar, being an Altmer, is bizarre. The story of Mankar's birth is also odd, as Callis delivers him at the moment that the usurper dies, and conveys that he is coming and he will bring death. What became of him after the events of the refugees is largely up to speculation. In my eyes, it can be easily assumed that he likely was not raised as a member of the Camoran dynasty, given the fact that he was a bastard son of the Camoran usurper. This is a good jumping-off point for the rest of his life, and for a brief summary of the founding of the Mythic Dawn cult. Again, I just want to lay the foundation here, and then we'll get into the juicy stuff. On the topic of Mankar's personal life, we actually know very little. We can confidently assume that Mankar somehow found his way into Daedra worship, and I would imagine through much dedication and study, Mehrunes Dagon eventually chose Mankar Camoran as his top disciple, offering him his holy book. Interestingly, within the Xarxes, on the right page of the book we see a triangular shape, If translated properly, the words within the triangle spell out the name Mythic Dawn. Mankar devoted his whole being into analyzing the Xarxes and the creation of the Mythic Dawn, and at this point, wrote his treatises. We do have a conflicting piece of evidence here on when the commentaries were written, however, since Taormina in the Elder Scrolls IV states that the books are contemporary with Tiber Septim. However, if Mankar Camoran was really the child born to Callus and the refugees, that would place his birth year at 3rd Era 267, which is 229 years after the death of Tiber Septim. Either Taormina is wrong, the refugees is wrong, or Mankar was somehow able to create a Dragon Break-like event through his research into the Xarxes. We'll touch more on that later. For now, we're trying to keep things simple and just establish a timeline. Okay, so in Volume 1 of Camoran's manifestos, he notes that he did preach openly at one point, but his views were not catching on, to say the least. It was only after he became secretive about his sermonizing that people became interested. Roaring, I wandered until I grew hoarse with the gospel. I had read the mysteries of Lord Dagon, and feeling anew, went mad with the overflow. My words found no purchase until I became hidden. These were not words for the common of Tamriel, whose clergy long ago feigned the very existence of the dawn. Soon enough, more and more people began to get drawn in by the commentaries and the cult-like behavior, until finally Mankar had reached enough manpower for him to organize the assassination of the Emperor, ushering in Mehrunes Dagon's invasion. But I will ask the question now that I posited previously. What did Mankar really believe? What was contained within the commentaries that was so potent it could convince potentially thousands of people across Tamriel to join the Mythic Dawn's ranks? Well, let's find out. So, during my investigation into Camoran's philosophical beliefs, and by proxy the Mythic Dawn's philosophical beliefs, I found a series of what I would refer to as pillars of Camoran's belief system, which he sees as fact. They are as follows. Pillar 1. The word of Mankar Camoran is the divine will of Mehrunes Dagon, as revealed to him through their holy book, the Mysterium Xarxes. Pillar 2. Lorkhan was a Daedric prince, the Daedric Prince of Change, who was the original prince of the realm of Mundus. Pillar 3. Lorkhan was killed by the Aedra, who are seen as false gods and betrayers of Lorkhan and the Magna-Ge. Pillar 4. Daedric princes are seen as powerful and uncorrupted, whereas Aedra are seen as cowardly and weak. Pillar 5. The Aedra split Lorkhan's progeny from their divine sparks, rendering mortals subject to true death, unlike the Daedra, which are reborn in the fires of Oblivion. Pillar 6. Mehrunes Dagon is an instrument of the Magna-Ge created in the very bowels of Lig to destroy the current order in an effort to recreate the world as Lorkhan and perhaps Magnus intended it to be. Pillar 7. The faithful of Mehrunes Dagon will be admitted to Mankar Camoran's plane of paradise, Gaiar Alata, upon their deaths, where they will be released of all unknowns and tempered to rule over Tamriel Reborn. I know that's a lot to take in, so I'd like to spend the rest of the video breaking down these pillars one at a time to show where the evidence is for each. Camoran is seen as the head of the Mythic Dawn faction, not only in-game by his various disciples, but also in the hidden faction system within Oblivion's code. Mankar Camoran is part of the Mankar Camoran faction, which sets him at a plus 100 disposition level with all members of the Mythic Dawn faction, which is an interesting side note. Mankar, of course, also possesses the Mysterium Xarxes until it is taken from him by the Hero of Kvatch, which signifies his status as a chosen of Mehrunes Dagon in a sense, and his writings on the Mysterium Xarxes serve as the foundational text for the entire organization. One member of the Mythic Dawn, which you can interact with at the end of Oblivion's main quest, even states that Mankar Camoran was viewed as Mehrunes Dagon's equal in the eyes of the cult.
Mankar Camoran was our leader, our teacher, our master. He had the secret knowledge. He dealt with Mehrunes Dagon as an equal.
There are, in fact, some interesting things going on with Mankar as well that would lend to the idea that he is someone special. 3 things, to be exact. The first topic is that of his race, which we already briefly discussed. In all likelihood, Mankar Camoran should be a Bosmer, but appears as an Altmer. There is a line in the commentaries that people often use to explain this actually, and it goes hand in hand with another bizarre thing that Mankar can do, which is our second point. Mankar is able to wear the Amulet of Kings around his neck, which, you may know, is impossible for anyone to wear unless they are of the dragon blood. These 2 points often culminate in one line from the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, which is as follows.
Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights, I could speak fire.
People often take this passage to mean that Mankar altered himself somehow. Speak Fire seems to be alluding to Mankar being able to shout, which would make him a Dragonborn, which would make him able to wear the Amulet of Kings. His race also may have been altered during this, and interestingly, we can actually get some help from the Elder Scrolls Legends with this. In Legends' most recent card pack update, Mankar Camoran was added to the game along with tons of other Oblivion-themed cards. In Legends, cards have a type which is assigned to the type of creature they are. Mankar's card is a split type, where he is represented as both an Altmer and a Bosmer simultaneously. Now, Legends screwed up the Red Brahmin completely in my opinion, so this should be taken with a grain of salt, but I find this very interesting nonetheless. So, how would he actually change his race though? Well, this opens up an entirely new can of worms, and is part of the reason this video took me so long to get out. In the Elder Scrolls, there is a word that is fairly unknown by most players, but also vastly important to the foundation of the universe. This word is Nimic. Some of you may have heard this word used recently in the Elder Scrolls Online's Blackwood chapter, which I played through entirely, specifically for this video, and it was not worth it. Anyway, Nimics are essentially names, but they're the true names of Daedric entities in the Elder Scrolls, otherwise known as their incantory names. They can almost be seen as a blueprint in a sense for Daedra, as it's how they reconstruct themselves upon death, i.e. Nimics are the parts of Daedra that endure even after their deaths. All Daedra have Nimics, but the stronger the Daedra, the more complex the Nimic. Daedric princes, then, can be viewed as having the most complex of Nimics. Due to the nature of Nimics, they hold significant power over the Daedra they belong to also. Mehrunes Dagon has twice been defeated by mortals gaining knowledge of his Nimics, once in the Elder Scrolls Online, and once, of all places, the Elder Scrolls Battlespire. So I'm sure you're probably a little confused right now if this is new to you, and if you haven't read the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes like a madman like I have, you may be wondering what any of this has to do with Mankar Camoran or the Mythic Dawn. Well, Mankar, as I said, changed his race somehow, or at least that's the theory anyway, and Legends seems to support this with his card. Well, in the first paragraph of Book 1 of the commentaries, titled Dagon, in Daedric at the beginning, Mankar Camoran says this. Greetings, novitiate, and know first, a reassurance. Mankar Camoran was once like you, asleep, unwise, protonymic. And then he proceeds to say this 2 paragraphs later. Enter as Lord Dagon has written. Come slow, and bring 4 keys. Know that then you are royalty, a new breed of destroyer, whose garden shall flood with flowers known and unknown, as it was in the Mythic Dawn. Thus shall you return to your first primal wail, and yet come out different. It shall this time be Neo-Nimbiosis, master akin to master, whose mother is Miasma. And then in the final verse of Book 1, he mirrors the first line with this. Red drink, razor fed, I had glimpsed the path unto the garden, and knew that to inform others of its harbour, I had to first drown myself in Search's sea. Know ye that I have found my fleet, and that you are the flagship of my hope. Greetings, novitiate. Mankar Camoran was once you, asleep, unwise, protonymic, but am no more. Now I sit and wait to feast with thee on all the worlds of this cosmos. Numantia, liberty. Now, what I take these passages to mean is that somehow Mankar Camoran both, 1, had a Nimic despite being a Bosmer, and 2, somehow was able to change it. Importantly to this point, in 2016, during an Elder Scrolls Online related interview with then lead lore master Lawrence Schick, it was confirmed that Bosmer priests, called Namespinners, actually have the ability to alter the physical forms of beings by speaking a new suffix into their proto-Nimic. Now this is technically unofficial material, seeing as it hasn't been put into or mentioned in any of the games, but it's noteworthy nonetheless. More to the point, it is far more likely that Mankar somehow used the Mysterium Xarxes to alter his Nimic, granting him an altered Altmer physical form, whilst also giving him the blood of the dragon in order for him to wear the Amulet of Kings. How he did this is unclear still, though there is a largely believed theory that Mankar used the infamous artifact, Mehrunes Razor, to enact this change. This theory stems from Michael Kirkbride's 2013 AMA on r/Teslore nearly 12 years ago upon the recording of this video. MK took to Reddit to answer questions about the Elder Scrolls series from fans, and this entire AMA has been archived by the lovely people at UESP. However, there are a few loose ends here. Reddit user MojoNation1487, commonly referred to as just Mojo, asked Kirkbride several questions during this Q&A, and they seemed just as obsessed with the Mythic Dawn as I am currently. Mojo reportedly asked Kirkbride about the nature of Mankar's metamorphosis, and Kirkbride responded with the quote that spawned this theory. Here it is. Mojo, how did Mankar recreate himself? Is it similar to the Young philosophy in that he took control of his own conception and birth? Did he do it through a dragon break? MK, he didn't do it through a dragon break. He did it with the razor, cutting his Nimics back into a versioned Dawn. Think Hellraiser, and you're close. Now, unfortunately for my sanity, this quote has actually not been archived on the UESP, and it was never even asked during the Reddit Q&A. So, how is all of this connected? Well, as far as I could tell, and believe you me, I scoured the internet for this information, this theory stems from something that Michael Kirkbride stated on a place called #Memospore2, which was an old IRC channel. I spoke to Reddit user u/Prince of Plots about this on r/Teslore, and he had this quote to say. #Memospore2 was an IRC channel that was going at the time. Originally there was #Memospore, but it became too public. Concurrent to MK's AMA here on r/Teslore, he also took questions in the IRC channel. Being an IRC chat, you can't access the original messages. The Imperial Library archived some, but apparently not all. This conversation with u/Prince of Plots led me back to the original Q&A, where I found a comment by Reddit user u/Numinute, who is at this point patient zero, as it were, for this information, considering that #Memospore2 no longer exists. If you seek out this stuff for yourself, be warned, every link that I clicked on that used to direct to #Memospore2 now redirects you to an adult entertainment site. I checked the Imperial Library to see if this was archived, but to no avail. If you can find it, that would be incredible, or better yet, if you know Michael Kirkbride, how about you send him this video so we can get an updated, savable quote. But anyway, that's where the idea stems from that Mankar used the razor to change his Nimic, and the only reason that I still refer to it vaguely and not in canon is because it has only ever been explicitly explained outside of official Elder Scrolls media, but I also believe this is still the best explanation we have for Mankar's altered self. So that's the bulk of it about Mankar's race, but we're not done yet. Earlier in the video I had mentioned Taormina from the Elder Scrolls IV. She states that the Mythic Dawn commentaries are contemporary with Tiber Septim, which is honestly one of the strangest things yet in Mankar's timeline. If the Refugees is to be taken as an accurate telling of Camoran's birth, then again, his birthday should be sometime in 3rd Era 276, which is 229 years after Tiber Septim's death. How then did Mankar write books after Septim's death that somehow are contemporary with Tiber Septim's life? I would have to imagine this is either a line of dialogue that accidentally was thrown into Oblivion and no one fact-checked it, or we have to believe that Mankar either enacted a dragon break, which Michael Kirkbride said he didn't, or he somehow time-traveled or something. I don't know. At this point, I'm done making up excuses for Bethesda, but also it is possible that Hermaeus Mora somehow spread the knowledge of... No, I said I'm not making excuses anymore. I'm moving on.
It is Tamriel, the realm of change, brother to madness, sister to deceit. Your false gods could not entirely rewrite history. Thus you remember tales of Lorcan vilified, a dead trickster whose heart came to Tamriel. But if a god can die, how does his heart survive? He is Daedroth! Tamriel I Daedroth! The principalities have sparkled as gems in the black reaches of Oblivion since the first morning. Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbour of Meridia, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mephala, and Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorcan, misnamed Tamriel by deluded mortals. Yes, you understand now. Tamriel is just one more Daedric realm of Oblivion.
Camoran holds the belief that Nirn, or specifically Tamriel, is simply another Daedric realm. This realm is called Dawn's Beauty, the Aldmeri translation for Tamriel. Lorcan was the prince of this realm before, but he was betrayed by the Aedra. This is a very interesting thought, though also very heretical. On a surface level, this is a compelling theory, but it goes completely counter to the way that Mundus is structured in the cosmos, for one. If the Mundus were originally a Daedric realm, it would lie in Oblivion, and of course, it does not. Camoran's calling of just Tamriel as Lorcan's realm is also very odd, and often taken by the fans to be poetic in nature, but it is possible that he believes that only Tamriel was his realm, I suppose, although this is countered by the existence of another place that we'll get into later in this section. But for the clarity of this part of the video, I have taken the stance that Mankar is referring to the entire Mundus, not just Tamriel. So this is not to say that Nirn couldn't be a special Daedric realm that lies in the heart of the cosmos, but it is certainly heterodoxical. It is also possible that the Aedra shifted the plane when they assisted Lorcan. So my understanding is that Mankar believes that Lorcan was the Daedric Prince of Change. He calls Tamriel the Realm of Change, and if Lorcan were the prince of this realm, it stands to reason that he would be the Prince of Change. This is noteworthy as Mankar's lord, Mehrunes Dagon, is referred to as the Daedric Prince of Change also, as one of his many titles. Internally to Mankar's theory, Lorcan as a deity of change does make sense due to his status as the son of Padme, the father of all change. All of the Daedric princes also are believed to be descended only from the blood of Padme, which does lend credence to the idea of Lorcan being Daedric in origin. However, the more common way of thinking about Aedra and Daedra is that Aedra are deities which assisted in the creation of Mundus, whereas Daedra are those who did not assist in creation. Our ancestors and not our ancestors is a common way to translate the words Aedra and Daedra. So Lorcan, having been of Padmaic origins but also having a great deal of importance in the creation of the Mundus, puts him in a strange spot. Not quite an Aedra, but not quite a Daedra. At the end of the day, this comes down to semantics, essentially. Sort of like how Meridia is a little bit off in the Daedric pantheon due to her Anuic origins. Lorcan as a Daedric prince, therefore, is not fully out of the question, but it certainly is a viewpoint that is necessary to believe if we are to understand Camoran's philosophy. Lorcan is mentioned a handful of times in the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, but typically he is given different names or titles. Specifically, he is referred to as both the mutant and the upstart who vanishes, and Mankar seems to think that a place known as Lig was his domain, although this definition gets murky since it would stand to reason that all of Nirn would be Lorcan's domain, not just a subsection. Perhaps Lig was somehow the seat of power for Lorcan and Nirn, or more specifically Tamriel, as that is the main focus of Camoran's doctrine. Lig is another mysterious Kirkbridean vestige in the Elder Scrolls lore, and it, just like many things regarding the commentaries, is very confusing. Mojo, in the same Reddit AMA that he asked MK about Camoran's alteration, also asked him about Lig. Thankfully, this response is still archived and available. Mojo: is Lig a former Kalpa's name for Tamriel? MK: Lig. It's one of the adjacent places. It's still there. I wouldn't call it a different Kalpa so much as a parallel version of Tamriel. Well, thank Dagon for Mojo. He's made my job much easier here. So Kirkbride states that Lig is one of the adjacent places with a capital A and likens it to a parallel version of Tamriel.
Okay.
Well, thankfully, Lig doesn't have a whole lot to do with this part of the video, so I can put off talking about it for now. The only reason I wanted to touch on it now is because it runs counter to the claim that Lorcan's realm was just Tamriel. If it was only Tamriel, it could not also be Lig. Of course, that is all according to Mankar Kirkbride. I mean, Michael Camoran. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about actually still pertains to Lorcan, but I wanted to split the sections about him up because there's going to be a lot of talking about Lorcan in this video. This section will cover his betrayal at the hands of the Aedra, or at least that is Mankar's perception of this event. It's no small secret that Lorcan was killed by the Aedra. In what I'll call the mainstream doctrines across Tamriel, this is taught regularly, in fact. The Adamantine Tower was made for the gods during creation and served as the original seat of Lorcan's judgment, from which the Aedra, specifically Trinimac, cast down Lorcan's heart to the mortals below. Typically, this is seen as justice. Lorcan is viewed as a trickster who manipulated the Aedra into creating the Mundus, thus trapping them there. For his punishment, Lorcan was split from his divine center, that of course being his heart. Now, like I said, this is all fairly standard stuff in the Elder Scrolls lore. I'm not really coming up with anything new here, just telling it as it is commonly portrayed. Camoran, however, naturally has a different viewpoint on this matter. He sees the Aedra as betrayers. If Lorcan was the original deity of Mundus, which would have been his plane of Oblivion, then the Aedra can actually be seen as betrayers in a sense, who killed the original master of this realm and have since taken over. Camoran states that the Aedra are weak and hide behind their statues and altars, whereas the Daedric princes are the opposite. They take charge and reward their followers appropriately. Again, at face value, this sounds compelling, especially from a gameplay point of view. The Daedric princes reward their faithful with artifacts of great power and directly speak to those willing to serve under them. The Aedra, for the most part, are portrayed, at least in the more recent titles, as silent. His whole theory basically runs counter to the Monomyth, which is a book that outlines creation. Mankar's exact quote on the matter is as follows.
Oathbreakers beware, for their traitors run through the Nimic paths. Run are dogs of prolix gods. The dragon's blood have hidden ascension in 6,000 years of ethereal labyrinth, which is arena, which they yet deny is oathbound. By the book, take this key, and pierce the divine shell that encloses the mantle takers, the skin of gold, scarab eye orbex. Woe to the oathbreakers of the skin of gold. The Xarxes Mysterium says, be fooled not by the forlorn that ride astray the roadway, for they lost faith, and thus losing was caused by the Aedra, who would know no other planets. Whereby the words of Lord Dagon instructs us to destroy these faithless.
So there are a few things we need to go over here. First and foremost would be defining what constitutes an Oathbreaker. It is my interpretation that the Oathbreakers are the Aedra. If in Camoran's view Tamriel was the realm of Lorcan, then it stands to reason that the ones who killed him would be deemed guilty of breaking an oath. Camoran in fact specifically calls the Aedra betrayers.
Julianos, Dibella, and Stondar are all Lorcan's betrayers, posing as divinities in a principality that has lost its guiding light.
They betrayed him, splitting him from his divine center, broke their oath to Lorcan and Tamriel, which Mankar describes as oath-bound. I have seen counterclaims to this stating that Mankar was referring to the tribunal, but honestly, I have no idea what they would have to do with anything he's talking about. I wouldn't understand the point of it. Yes, Camoran does use the phrase the skin of gold during his Oathbreaker passage, which could be a reference to the Chimer, but this is flimsy in my eyes. It could just as easily be mentioning Altmer or Aldmer, and at best it describes one half of the tribunal, and at worst it describes none of them. I would also like to mention that in ancient Egyptian mythology it was thought that the skin of the gods was gold. In my view, especially with the mention of a scarab so close by in the text, I think it makes sense that all Mankar was doing was mentioning the gods. In summary, Mankar Camoran believes the Aedra to be false gods, having betrayed their original duties by killing Lorcan and taking over the Mundus as tyrants. This chapter will likely be one of the shortest, as we already covered most of the points in the last section, but I want to make it clear that I find this point to be a distinct one from the last. Mankar not only sees the Aedra as betrayers, as we previously discussed, but he also sees them as weak in comparison. Cowardly.
Ask yourself, how is it that mighty gods die, yet the Daedra stand incorruptible? How is it that the Daedra forthrightly proclaim themselves to man, while the gods cower behind statues and the faithless words of traitor priests? It is simple. They are not gods at all. The truth has been in front of you since you first were born. The Daedra are the true gods of this universe. What are scholarship, love, and mercy when compared to fate, night, and destruction? The gods you worship are trifling shadows of first causes.
Mankar says that the Aedra hide behind statues and gospels, whereas the Daedric princes are not cowardly. They present themselves to the mortal races, unafraid to display the full power of their might. Like most of Camoran's points, there is a semblance of truth here. However, the weak versus powerful argument is easily undermined by Akatosh's intervention at the end of Oblivion. Outside of that instance, though, it is easy to understand why folks might gather around Mankar's words, as it does generally seem to be the case that the Aedra do not present themselves to their followers.
First Tower Dictate. Render the mutant bound where he may do no more harm. As god of the Mundus, alike shall be his progeny, split from their divine sparks.
This passage is central to the next belief of the Mythic Dawn cult. In the text, the mutant is Lorcan, and it is supposed to be a description of the events that took place upon the Adamantine Tower during the trial of Lorcan. Here, the Aedra removed Lorcan's heart from his body, thus rendering him apart from his divine spark. Here, they state that alike shall be his progeny, meaning that the supposed once immortal races of the Mundus shall forever be granted mortality. This is contrasted easily with the Daedra. Notoriously, Daedra cannot die. Physically they can, but they are reborn in the fires of Oblivion according to their mimics upon death. Thus is the point. The mortal races should be immortal. It is the gods who stripped us of our immortality and now force us to worship them as lackeys. It stands to reason that if Lorcan was a Daedric prince, we may once have been his Daedra, but are no longer connected to our mimics and thus unable to reform. Mankar Camoran preaches about a new life for his followers in paradise, an eternal life. Paradise is to be a place where the Mythic Dawn can return to their roots and once again be granted their status among the Daedra.
I give my soul to the Magna-Ge, saith the joyous in paradise, for they created Mehrunes the Razor in secret, in the very bowels of Lig, the domain of the upstart who vanishes. Though they came from diverse waters, each get shared sole purpose, to artifice a prince of good, spinning his likeness in random swath, and imbuing him with Oblivion's most precious and scarce asset, hope.
Throughout the tetralogy of books, Mankar makes several references to the Magna-Ge. Some of you watching may be unfamiliar with this term. In the common mythos, when Magnus, the architect of Mundus, and his offspring, the Magna-Ge, realized how much power they would have to expend in the creation of Nirn, they abandoned the project and fled through the sky, tearing holes in the veil of Oblivion on their journey back to Aetherius. The largest hole in the sky was that of Magnus, which became the sun, while the lesser holes created by the Magna-Ge became the stars. Not much is known of the Magna-Ge. A quick trip to the UESP page would demonstrate as much, but Mankar Camoran actually has much to say about them. Mankar first and foremost refers to himself at one point as Mankar of the Stars, which we could take to mean Mankar of the Magna-Ge, as the two are essentially synonymous with one another. Now, I don't think Mankar is literally saying that he's on the same level as the Magna-Ge, but more saying that he works on their behalf. I wouldn't be opposed to the idea that Mankar counts himself among their ranks, though. In the text at the beginning of this chapter, Mankar implies that the faithful in Paradise should give themselves to the Magna-Ge for the reason that they created Mehrunes Dagon, which we'll touch on in a minute. Mankar here makes certain to refer to the Magna-Ge as they, not we, though, and credits them with the creation of his lord, which he obviously could not have taken part in. This transitions us nicely into talking about Mehrunes' creation through the lens of Mankar's eyes. Mankar states that Dagon was created in the land of Lig, which he claims was the domain of Lorkhan, i.e. the upstart who vanishes. Now, I'm going to be skipping over a lot of stuff about Lig. There's a whole thing about how the Dregs used to own Lig, and Mehrunes Dagon destroyed it after a certain period of time, but all of that doesn't really matter to the point being made here. So Mankar claims that the Get, the plural form of Ge for Magna-Ge, made Dagon through a shared purpose, to create a prince of good imbued with hope. Now, this is a very different take on Mehrunes Dagon than what is perceived normally, which is that Dagon is seen as a god of destruction and cataclysm. This is interesting, though, due to the fact that if Dagon were truly created by the Magna-Ge, he would not be of the blood of Padme, and thus his nature may truly not be quite so inherently evil as we normally see him portrayed. Perhaps he really was just designed to reclaim Tamriel, or Nirn as his homeland, and we've misconstrued his message this whole time.
Kill Silas. He and his family have served their purpose. Kill him. Take your rightful place as my champion, or I will crush you.
Yeah, okay, or maybe not, I don't know. Mankar also seems to believe that Dagon will come as a liberator of mankind once he reclaims his rightful home from the claws of the Aedra. Mankar specifically states that Tamriel and Oblivion shall be rejoined, and that Dagon will walk Tamriel once more.
You cannot stop Lord Dagon. The walls between our worlds are crumbling. The mythic dawn grows nearer with every rift in the firmament. Soon, very soon, the lines now blurred will be erased. Tamriel and Oblivion rejoined, the mythic age reborn. Lord Dagon shall walk Tamriel again. The world shall be remade. The new age shall rise from the ashes of the old. My vision shall be realized. Weakness will be purged from the world, and mortal and immortal alike purified in the refiner's fire.
Now, as to why the Magna-Ge would have constructed Mehrunes Dagon to do this, I have no idea. Perhaps it could have been the will of Magnus, or some such. I would imagine there was something revealed to Camoran in the Mysterium Xarxes that showed him this revelation, but what it was, I have no idea, and I don't think that we will ever find an answer to this. Outside of the Magna-Ge, we do have a translation for the 2 pages of the Mysterium Xarxes that we see in Oblivion. The right page is difficult to decipher because the letters are strewn about the page, but when placed in the proper order, they can be interpreted as saying,
"When I walk the earth again, the faithful among you shall receive your reward, to be set above all other mortals forever. As for the rest, the weak shall be winnowed, the timid shall be cast down, the mighty shall tremble at my feet and pray for pardon."
If this truly is the holy word of Mehrunes Dagon, it corroborates Mankar's claim of Mehrunes having been to Tamriel by his stating of, "When I walk the earth again," implying that he has walked the earth of Dawn's beauty before. However, it does not mention his birth/creation via the Magna-Ge, unfortunately. Dagon goes on to say in the book that those who worship him will be rewarded, which segments us beautifully into our final segment of Mythic Dawn belief.
For Lord Dagon, forever reborn in blood and fire from the waters of Oblivion.
It is Mankar Camoran's belief that when Mehrunes Dagon inevitably takes over Tamriel, his flock of faithful needs to be ready. The realm of Gaiar Alata, also known as Paradise, is the final training ground for the Mythic Dawn. You, brother, are to sit with me in Paradise, and be released of all unknowns. Mankar refers to this place as Paradise, but in truth, it is anything but. Mythic Dawn agents who have died in service to their cause wind up in Paradise. In a sense, they have been granted eternal life, but they are to live out this eternity in a pocket realm of the Deadlands, overruled by a tyrannical cult leader. Excuse me, an alleged tyrannical cult leader. I'll let you be the judge of that. Some of Mankar's minions who have been sent to Paradise have had time to reflect on their life choices. It would seem that many of them are woeful about what they have done, regretting pledging their lives to Camoran and the Lord of Destruction. Those who are deemed weak or ungrateful for their eternal life are tortured in the Forbidden Grotto. Per Dagon's own words,
"The weak shall be winnowed, the timid shall be cast down."
These men and women are tortured by Dremora and cultists alike, assumingly in an effort to train the novitiates into true soldiers for the coming age of Mehrunes. Thus, this is the final pillar of Mythic Dawn belief, that Paradise awaits the faithful, and that they'll have a special place in the New Dawn when Mehrunes Dagon finally takes back his home. So in conclusion, Mankar Camoran is an enigmatic figure whose past is shrouded in mystique and mystery alike. His charismatic appeal and unique ideas captivated many citizens across Tamriel, and his corpus of scripture are among the most important to ever grace the face of Nirn. He and his cult altered the course of history, as I'm sure was foretold in the scrolls. Mankar was seen as a prophet to Mehrunes Dagon, and in some cases an equal. He reshaped his destiny using Dagon's profaned artifacts, the Razor and the Xarxes, cementing himself as the chosen of Dagon. Using this newfound knowledge and power, he nurtured not only a cult of personality, but a cult of zealots, willing to die for the beliefs that he instilled in them. Was he right? Was he wrong? Was he somewhere in between? Perhaps the world will never know. However, I don't think I would be at all off base in saying that he remains at least one of the most interesting people to grace the Elder Scrolls. I believe I provided evidence for each of my claims here. I will let you all be the judges of if it was sufficient enough evidence to support my theory. If there was a pillar of the Mythic Dawn belief system that you think was lacking or that I messed up on in any way, now would be an excellent time to rush to the comments. I didn't want to do a full, comprehensive breakdown of every single passage in the Mysterium Xarxes or the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, as I just flatly don't find every passage meaningful in the same way. I think if you're a Mythic Dawn member, these pillars are important to know, but not believing that Mehrunes Dagon destroyed Lig is not going to mess up your basic faith. Just like how in real religions in the real world, some people pick and choose what they want to believe. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please let me know. This was by far the most taxing video I've worked on for the channel, and the script wound up being longer than most of the papers I had to write during all 4 years of college combined. If you wouldn't mind dropping a like, comment, or a subscription on the channel, which you can always unsubscribe later, it would be much appreciated. It's a semi-melting pot of content here. We do lore, Elder Scrolls Legends, other fantasy-related genres. I've been playing Dark Souls, and I'll be doing a Shadow of the Erdtree, Elden Ring playthrough soon, so I would love to see many of you in future videos regardless of what they may be. I have been Daraloth, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.